Thanks everyone for joining us today for our Code Collaborative call. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here to talk through things and kind of give a brief update on the Building Code Board meeting that happened last week. We'll dive into that. But first off, well, let's do some introductions. We'll start in the room and then we'll go online. Daniel, if you want to start first, then we'll work this way.
Yeah, Daniel Mostakevich with the Association of Idaho Cities.
Suzanne Mayer, the National Fire Sprinkler Association.
And I'm Lance Sayers, the policy analyst for Association of Idaho Cities.
Jerry Peterson, Home Energy Services.
Dave Freelove, Idaho Energy Code Circuit Rider.
Jerica, do you want to go for us? You're the first person I see on my screen.
Sure. I'm Jerica Stacy. I'm the Director of Technical Training at the International Code Council, and I live in Ammon, Idaho.
Thanks, Jerica. Really appreciate you being on today. Jeff Wardle.
Jeff Wardle, attorney at Clark Wardle in Boise, and have been heavily involved with our code adoption through BOMA.
Thanks for being on today, Jeff. We're glad to have you. Alan Chambers.
Hi, yes, Alan Chambers. I'm a building official with Safe Built, and also operations manager for our company in the state of Idaho.
Thanks for being on, Alan. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Chad.
Chad Blanco, AIA Idaho. I am the co-chair of our advocacy committee.
Thanks for being on today, Chad. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Tess.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late joining. Nice to see you all. I'm Tess Studley, Program Manager of Energy Codes Training at Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Thanks, Tess. Damon.
Damon Woods, University of Idaho Integrated Design Lab, focused on kind of the commercial aspects of the energy code.
Thanks, Damon. A quick shout out to Damon. If I remember right, Damon, this is the month that, or actually next month. Next month is when your wife is due, right?
Yeah, we're about 4 weeks out. So
fantastic.
I'll be hard to reach for a couple of months. Yeah.
Well, hey,
a couple years.
Yeah, a couple of years. That's right.
Don't scare me too much yet.
Zero to that couple of years. But hey, whenever your little one comes, we'd love to see pictures and be able to share that with the collaborative if you're comfortable with that.
Thanks, Lance. Yeah, I will. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Damon. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Torsky with Cascade Natural Gas, sister company to Intermountain Gas, and I'm a building code specialist with them. So all things building code is my world. Thanks.
Thanks for being on today. Eric.
Hey, Eric Hagan. I'm an architect in Boise. I'm on the advocacy committee, the AIA Central Idaho Advocacy Committee, or all of Idaho, I guess. Just here because I'm curious.
Yeah, thanks for being on, Eric. The invitation's always open, so we're glad to have you. Great.
Yeah, Greg Johnson with the Vista, and I wanted to thank you, Lance, for all your fortitude and keep as with all the ups and downs and twists and turns with this. So thank you for keep on getting us together and making progress.
Hey, thank you, Greg. We appreciate the support from Avista and for continuing to be a part of the conversation. We really do appreciate it. Kathy.
Hi, good afternoon. Kathy Wold. I'm the manager of the Energy Efficiency Program for Intermountain Gas for residential and commercial.
Thanks, Kathy. Good to have you on. Bouncing around on names, so I'm making sure to go in order. Kevin.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Kevin Rose. I work with Tess on NIA's Codes and Standards team.
Thanks, Kevin. We really appreciate being here and all the input that you can give us on looking at other states and just helping us to keep things on track. So thanks for being here. Cherie.
Hello, Cherie Wilhite, Idaho Power, and I run some of our new construction and major renovation programs for CNI.
Thanks for being on, Cherie. We really appreciate you taking time to be here. I think, Todd, that you're the next one. You might be cleanup duties here.
Yeah, works for me. Hey everybody, Todd Greenwell, Idaho Power, and I am heavily involved in the residential energy efficiency incentives. Thank you.
Thanks for being on, Todd. thank you to all of you for taking the time. I know you're busy. I know there's a lot to worry about, and if there's one thing about the legislative world, there always seems to be one thing or one more thing that pops up and that we need to keep track of. But really appreciate being able to gather here and to talk about things. Before we dig too much into it, though, I did want to give David a quick second to talk about just trainings, giving an update on some of the things in the past, and then we can also talk about what things will look like moving forward.
All right, so just updates on training. So we're wrapping up for the year right now. I think we were pretty successful on our trainings this year. We had add a couple of extra air balance trainings in this year. It seems to be pretty popular. I'm gonna I try to avoid that, get everybody to our online courses. And we were pretty successful, more successful in areas of Idaho than in others. Very successful in North Idaho with training up there. We were pretty receptive. We had okay training in Eastern Idaho. Central Idaho was really good. And then as well as we were, did the Idaho conference, attended that. Everything seemed to go fairly well this year. It seems like things are stepping up. Moving forward, looking ahead, I've got air balance training scheduled for July 14th, November 10th, February 9th, and June 11th. And then as well, I will do the DETs on October 2nd through 7th and March 9th through 10th. This year as well, and I don't know if Lance could pull
I've got it right here. You can just read it off those
Okay.
dates.
So this year as well, what we're going to do is we pre-scheduled trainings this year, and we're going to do it regionally. So the week of August 10th, we'll be scheduling Post Falls, Lewiston, so North Idaho area. August 21st, we'll be doing Twin Falls, Jerome region. Jerry has some other locations in there as well too. We'll throw in while we're there. Anytime we're going to a region of the state, we try to throw in as many locations as we can at once. For an example, Moscow, Lewiston, they seem to always want to come together when we do the training. I think it's actually an excuse for one of the other jurisdictions to do, get out of town and go to a training for half a day. So we try to coordinate that way. The week of December 1st, we'll do Eastern Idaho, which will include Idaho Falls, Polkdale, and Rexburg. And then as well, April 1st will be Boise, which is AIC. We'll use this facility to do the trainings. May 3rd will be in Post Falls again. We'll head back up to North Idaho. So we're going to use certain locations this year, pre-schedule them with already selected locations, and then just get the flyers out to jurisdictions. To help with that, I'm going to, I spoke with Sam Zahorka, the Idaho president, and he's going to get, I'm able to get back on their agenda monthly and attend their training. So that way I can, be talking to the inspectors, building officials, and hopefully we'll be seeing some better attendance from then. In the past, this last year, we were specifically hitting their locations. We just found that it gets tough logistically when we're trying to schedule trainings, get the location, or use their facilities, get everybody there, and finding everything that works. There was a couple times we either had to cancel or we were moving stuff around last minute to fit it because the county commissioners wanted to use the room instead of letting us use the training. So I guess I can understand that. But what we're going to do is we've got some locations in these regions, and we'll just be able to schedule those locations and get the trainings and the topics out there and get flyers created and sent out. So that's what I have, Jerry, as well. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but Jerry also has.
We can go to that PowerPoint too and pull that up for Jerry.
With Jerry, and at the same time too, we will be, when we can, we'll be teaming up on the trainings to do this together as well.
I'll find that one and we can send it out. So
from there, do you have some to add, Jerry?
No, I just wanted to put it out there for everybody that attends the collaborative. If you have questions or you would like to schedule one in your area, for your organization, please give Dave or I a call, and we're happy to fit those in. Like I said, when we're going into a region, we have typically 3 days, so it's easy to fit another one in there. If you'd like us to, even if it's just stopping by your building department or your organization to talk about what's being offered or answer questions. So please keep us in mind.
And then one last thing, we're freshening up a lot of our training modules, including adding some new ones specifically. We'll be doing some specific training on heat pumps, mini splits, and was there any other major one we were looking at?
Yeah, we've upgraded the ventilation, attic, crawls, and then we're trying to we've been very selective with very specific on some of the trainings, and we're going to try to offer a consolidated method. People can still request the individual ones, but what we want to do is kind of bring everybody up to speed. The trainings that we currently offer are based on the 2018, and so we want to bring in new practices, new methods and stuff, and we will change those titles to allow more people to apply for the CEUs.
Any questions or comments?
Thanks so much, Dave. Lance or Daniel, I think it'd be great if maybe with as a follow-up to send out, I know someone posted them in the chat, but send out those proposed training dates just as kind of inform for both Dave and Jerry, so people have a sense of the timing and the locations. That'd be great.
So Tess, as a follow-up to that, some of those dates we've chosen are kind of time slots. It's that 3-day time frame.
Yeah.
That we've reserved. And so if you see those and we're in your area and you want us to stop by, chat or do a training stuff, just reach out and we'll get you slotted in. We're already there. So it's very convenient for us and we don't mind. In fact, it's part of our job to stop by and answer questions that may be very specific to your region or difficulties that your regional difficulties. We want to try to address them.
Thanks, Tess. I'll put it in the listserv that we have. And then once we have dates narrowed down and we have a little more idea, we can send it out on the MailChimp listserv too. I'll start out with our more small group one so we can get the dates finalized and go from there. So yeah, happy to do that.
Jerry's selfishly going on vacation next week, so we're gonna have to put off a week. Thanks, Jerry. So anyway, but right after that, we will, because he has some of the contacts, I have some of the contacts for the training locations. But within the next couple of weeks, I do want to get those rooms reserved and get the flyers done and out. So we'll have flyers way ahead of time and location selected.
Third vacation in 7 years.
That's nice.
Good for you. Hopefully it'll be a good one. Well, let's go ahead and move forward. The part that really, I know why most of you are on the call is really to kind of debrief, recap from the building code board meeting. So we set some time for Jerry and Damon to kind of walk us through the residential commercial components. Where would you like to start, Jerry, with kind of just recapping that meeting?
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate everybody that came on today. It'd be great if I could just say this is what's going to happen and these are the dates. And unfortunately, we're working with not only the legislature but the governor's office, legislative services. There's quite a few cooks in the kitchen right now. I think the first thing that I wanted to clarify was the statute that was sent out, the rough draft. That is still a rough draft, and if you read through that, you'll see references to the 2018. We are not supporting it in that format. We want everything to reflect the 2024. And so there will be some rewrite, editing suggested on that statute before it moves forward. So that conversation right now is happening between Doppel and Ken Burgess with the building contractors. Ken wrote this at the end of the session last year, kind of as an emergency last minute thing. And he is not opposed to changing it. And so I'm working with both Ken and Doppel to get the language in there that reflects what we are trying to do. The intent is to have the language reflect what we agreed on in the rules. We want it to mirror what we proposed to the Senate, and then it was discarded by the House. And so our intent is to have that statutory language reflect, the 2 years of work that we put into in the rules. As far as the timeline goes, there are some unknowns. Doppel is still waiting clarification from the governor's office. They have a distinct legislative committee that they work through. And so they're waiting for some direction slash clarification from leadership, I think would be the appropriate term. With that, the intent moving forward from the legislature, the governor's office, is to put the building codes, energy code, in fact, all of the trades, to put those back in statute. And what I mean is back is originally all of this language was in statute. And then we created, the boards and the rulemaking process because they were tired of having the discussions that we have on a monthly basis. They were tired of having those up there in the legislature. And so they gave the power to the boards, and now they want to take it back. That seems to be the push. And so it's not just our codes, all of everything that we do with building codes, residential, commercial, and energy code are done through the building code board. But there are other boards for mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. And so they are asking to move all of those rules over into statute too. Whether they do it all at the same time or individually, we don't know. And then in doing that, how does that affect the board's operation? Does the board is bound by statute and rule to perform certain services. Do we run into unintended consequences as a result of that? And so I can try to repeat what Doppel expressed at the last meeting. If I'm wrong, and there's people here that attended that, please correct me or join in. The Doppel does not want to change the structure or the intent or the work that the boards do. One of the options on the table is to get the statute passed in January, February. Statute is typically the authorizing language. They can't do anything without, the statute says you have permission to do this. The rules define the process. And so historically, I see there's a question up there, Eric. Hopefully this answers it. Historically, we go through negotiated rulemaking process that gets approved by the board, submitted to the legislature approves it. and that goes into rule. Rule has the same enforcement as statute. Statute says you can, rules say this is how you do it. One of the options on the table is to reference the codes through the statute, and then leave the rulemaking process in play. And one of the timeline things that we're looking at is that if they want to continue that process, the statute would be approved January, February 27. We would then enter into negotiated rulemaking, which you can't do while the legislature's active. And so then we would have that summertime schedule. We would review the rules again, make any changes or edits, resubmit them, and then they would be approved in January, February 2028. Soft implementation would start on July 1st. Full implementation through
Soft implementation, January 1st.
Soft implementation is whoever wants to start enforcing by July 1st. But all jurisdictions have to have it written into their local ordinance by January 1 of 2029. That's the long stretched out version. There is another way to do it, and that is that we, so currently everybody is on the as written 2018 as amended. The other version would be to put it through statute. It would go into effect January, February of 2027. And the rules as proposed would go into effect as temporary / emergency rules. And that would step it up a year so that would start soft implementation and final a year earlier. That's what we're hoping to do. That's kind of that would put it into effect the quickest. And that would save us and the board and all of you from going through the negotiated rulemaking process again. We've already spent a couple of years on this. So here's what I'm asking, or we're asking, is that, don't put too much into the rough draft. It's just a proposed draft. And it's not binding. There's nothing contractual in there. What we want to look at is we want to look at the proposed rules that we've already worked through, that we hopefully have general consensus on, and identify anything that we may have missed, something that needs to come out, something that needs to go in, so that if they decided to adopt those temporarily, we can get those changed now or while we're working through the process. So please review the rules that we've already worked on and let me know if you have any thing that you want me to consider. I will continue to work with the contractors and Doppel and see if we can get that statute cleaned up and reflect what we're trying to do. That the Doppel has agreed to seek public input on that statute language, but they're not bound. There's nothing written anywhere that says, you have to do this or you have to do that. And they are probably not going to go into the public hearing process for this statute. They're not obligated to, but I think they do want to encourage some public input on the statute itself. The timeline on that is it's not a formal submission, but the language that they are proposing should be finished by August. I'm going to say the latter part of August. They want to have a final copy of the statute into their legislative services department. And they have a different one. It's called the legislative, anyway, it's a bit different than the norm. And then they will modify or work through corrections on that. We won't be a part of that if that happens. And so Yeah, the executive agency legislation, and so this is for the departments. They have their own version of it. And that's just to make sure the language is enforceable, et cetera. If that goes through in August, then we'll have a final draft. In an attempt to be, totally transparent with everybody, as soon as I find anything out about what's happening, any published public meetings, whatever, I will pass that on to Lance and get it out to the group. So I try and keep everybody up on it. I wish I could give you something more concise, but I don't.
I'm also, just so everyone knows, I'm going to add the rules from last session and put it in the chat so that you can just go and review it
please
after this meeting. And then I'll also send it out in an email, but just letting you know.
And what we're looking at there are the amendments and changes that we made and whether or not that fits, or I'm pretty sure we've got most of that worked out. Damon might chime in on the commercial aspect of it, see if there's something that's changing it on that. And with that, if you have questions, I'll turn it over to Damon for a minute if he wants to speak to the commercial part of it.
Hey, Jerry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Todd. Excuse me. Just a question, and I don't know if this can be answered or if it's not the place to even talk through it, but I'm kind of curious. We're talking about a different process, and what I'm still going back to is, February, when the Senate Commerce and Human Resource Committee, I think, voted unanimously yes, and the House Business Committee, as you mentioned earlier, they voted no, other than a couple, 2 or 3. Each of those two groups, I'm trying to understand more of what lens each of those two look through to come up with a very different answer for the same question of codes advancement. So what prohibits the culture from remaining the same just because it goes into statute? I mean, is that the carrot we're hanging out there that makes this thing to the Senate that alluring, I guess, to reverse their decisions, or how does that work? Or is it just another time we can talk about it?
No, I can touch on it, Todd. I want to be careful that we don't point fingers at individuals. Sometimes people are directed from leadership to do certain things or take a certain stance. And so we can't just point at an individual and say, it's this person's fault. There was some changes in that House committee. Some of the people were unelected, in the primaries. And so, we are always kind of in a state of flux with the different committees. Some of it is posturing, some of it is control. But our job, and this is important, and this is kind of a moving forward focus, we have to make our presence known up there. Right now, individual legislators, they're not engaged in the process. They don't understand the amount of work that we went through. They don't understand the collaborative and the work that we do, and the perception with some of the legislature is that we're primarily an advocacy group driven by outside interests. That has to change. That's the elephant in the room. We have to let our legislators, our building officials, they need to know that the collaborative is much more than that. That we try to look at this in an unbiased manner. They don't understand that all of the amendments that are currently in these codes come from this collaborative in the best interest of the state and our contractors, homeowners, et cetera. We play a much bigger role than they realize or understand. but they're not hearing from us. They're not, they're just not aware of the effort and or the expertise that we have available. And so part of our ongoing outreach, to all of those people would be, we can answer questions. We're here. If a legislator doesn't understand something, start with us. Give us a call. We'll give you the information in an unbiased manner and say, this is how we came to this point. Dave and I are available. This is part of what we do. It's part of our training. And so if you have somebody in your area that you think, doesn't fully understand what we do, we're happy to meet with them. I mentioned that I was working with PCA and Doppel, and so part of that commitment is to arrange to meet with specific legislators, and the first thing that I want to do is answer those questions that came up in that committee, and the people that said we didn't do this, we didn't do that, or we didn't address that. We can fix that. We just need to, it needs to be part of the message. We need to hear what their concerns are. We're not going to question their legitimacy, but we're definitely going to respond to them. And so that's part of that agreement, is to meet with them, sit down with them individually if needed, and say, this is what you brought up. This is what, how we came to this. Do you have other concerns? Is there something else we can address? We want to try and take away, those unknowns before this gets to the legislature again.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jerry. So that basically brings them to the table, which we didn't have during the 2-year vetting process we did. And I don't know what the impetus was of the word statute got brought up as that opening of the door to bring them closer to the process. And I guess their own initiative, is that what creates the fear that they could say, the heck with it, we're not going to look at it because we don't have time or something like that, where they don't move forward with anything if they don't have a gumption at any moment.
And
the control piece on there.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I just, there was talk in our group, I don't know, last month or something, that codes could be not necessarily put on the back burner, or not necessarily taken away, symbolically speaking, but it's up to them having, in all the things they're dealing with, the interest and gumption and enough coffee to go through this process that they did years ago before they turned it into a bunch of boards. Is that?
Yeah.
I'm just talking out loud. I guess I'm trying to figure out because ultimately they could jump into it and say this is too much and go right back to the process we're in now, which is, with all of 10 or 12 boards, depending on.
Yeah. And that's not out of the question for them to realize that they really don't have the time nor the expertise to be reviewing this in a legislative hearing. They simply don't have the time.
That's what I see too. And I know that the delivery of the work product we produce is extremely dependent. Well, I guess, yeah, there's a lot of dependency on what we do, out of all the voices out in the state collectively. And I don't know if it's supposed to be that way, but I do see that. It said that for the last 4 or 5 years, where this collaborative output is becoming the kingpin of where do we go as a state with these codes. And anyway, I don't need to belabor it. I'm just trying to figure out the bigger picture.
If we do our work, the collaborative deserves to maintain that position. They need to look at the collaborative specific to energy codes and say, are you guys okay with this? Or better yet, we set that agenda and say, this is what needs to happen. And so, we can operate within the constraints of the statute if we can, modify our perception of what we do.
Kind of seems the perception's there, because it's a not necessarily a leap of faith, but for this to even to be being talked about statute, it sounds like they've got us in their hip pocket as a resource, a heck of a good resource to move forward with what they may or may not want to do, depending on what the actual codes are that they're looking at. But so it sounds like with us in their hip pocket that there may not be a barrier. It's just a short-circuited way of getting to the end result that we've been talking about, 24 IECC stuff.
Damon wanted. Have
Yeah,
a question.
did you have anything you wanted to say, Damon, as far as about the commercial side, or any thoughts from the meeting that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd say the the vast majority of pushback came on the residential side, in terms of what we heard in the House committee. Um, very little on the commercial. Uh, it it seems like Doppel is really, moving forward with this transition to statute, not just for the energy code, but for the whole suite of building codes in Idaho. So in terms of kind of preparing for that and looking ahead, what does that mean for the commercial code? I'd like to, in terms of trainings, I'm planning to have some scheduled this October, November, and December, kind of end of the year, those final 3 months. And I'd like to try to target specific groups, rather than just have an open call. One of which, Chad and Eric, I'm glad you're on here, is AIA, and to get AIA Idaho's feedback on the commercial rules and the amendments that were proposed last year. There were a few in there dealing with um, lighting and a couple other topics, and just gauge whether, if this moves to statute, those are the same amendments we'd like to see, that we had during the negotiated rulemaking process last year. I'd also like to work with ASHRAE as well on the mechanical side, and hear from folks there, and maybe do a training specifically with ASHRAE. But kind of as has been historically the case with Idaho codes, commercial seems to be there's much more appetite for advancing to new code cycles amongst design professionals in both architecture and engineering. And there's much less appetite amongst the residential. That's kind of where we see pushbacks and more amendments and things like that. So that's my perspective on commercial. But if others have something else I'd like to say, feel free to chime in.
I just wanted to point out one of the things with the statute. The negotiated rulemaking process is highly formalized, calls for public hearings 60 days apart. It's typically a multi-year process, where statute, literally, you find a sponsor in both committees, you could line item, you can make changes, an individual, a company. It does open it up for that potential. And again, if they're not putting this out for comment, or they're not soliciting input, we could point that out in testimony and just say, with the same excuse you used against us that you didn't know about that, now you're doing it to the industry. And so we're hoping that it doesn't do that. On the other hand, beneficially, it does provide an opportunity for us to line item, amend, or add. And so if we have a specific thing that comes up, we could address that as an individual item through statute using a much more condensed process. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I'm not going to bet. I'm just going to say that right now it appears to be more of a control mechanism than a streamlining. From the way it's being pushed right now, it seems to be more of a controlling atmosphere than than trying to condense the process. So that's it. Nobody has questions.
Yeah, are there any questions? Eric, did you get the answer you're looking for to your question about moving into statute?
Yeah, I did. It just sounds like a really long, drawn out, difficult process.
Yes.
It is going to have its challenges for sure, and we'll just kind of have to see what it looks like as it continues to take shape and form. I did, Jeff, while you're on the call, I did want to ask you. I know I sent over the draft to you. I know that Jerry's already brought up the fact that this isn't the final version, but any thoughts or any advice that you'd give to us, or as far as like what we need to keep in mind with what they actually bring forward, anything that you looked at that you thought this has absolutely got to be cleaned up besides moving the dates as far as from 2018 to 2024?
No, I mean, it's obviously a work in progress, and we've got to move forward with that. And, with some of the legislative primary changes, some of the vocal people that weren't there last time, that were there last time aren't going to be here this time. The struggle just is there is a reason. There is a reason that we did this. And, I was there when we did this in 2002. And it's just difficult for when your worldview is that all regulation is bad, it is just difficult to function in that when the rest of the world recognizes the need for certain regulations. And it is going to be a challenge to take not just the building codes and the I suite of codes, but every other policy that they've decided now needs to be adopted by code. I mean, I just the concern I have is that we're going to get to the same spot down the road where we're all going to recognize and acknowledge there need to be further amendments, and their decision makers will just be taking the position that, well, we did that 3 years ago. Why do we need to do this? So it's going to be a lift, and I think obviously last year we need we had a committee that just didn't understand the process and didn't understand and appreciate how we got here. So
Yeah, well said, Jeff. I guess one question I'd ask to the group is, I just want to make sure we're all thinking about it. What we're saying here is that we're looking at a potential 2.5 year time frame before really there's any changes that take place. Are there any groups that aren't here that need to be here or need to understand that we're looking at a 2.5 year time frame before much of the codes or the rules, whatever we want to call it, is going to get approved?
So if we're looking at 2.5 years, would we consider the 2027?
No, you can't talk like that. No. I mean, potentially, if we went into formal negotiated rulemaking, we would probably want to look at it and see if there's something that we want to capture on that. I did misspeak about one thing. In the statute as it was proposed, not the rules, but in the statute itself, they specifically listed the air sealing requirements. And so if that statute does go through, those air sealing requirements would go into effect next year, which I think would be very beneficial for the residential aspect of it. And the builders are supportive of it, which is why it's in there. So there is a potential that we could get an early win on that specific piece of it.
I would just hate for us this process to take so long that we adopt a code that's already out of date when we adopt it.
Unfortunately, that's fairly typical. We're usually 1 to 2 code cycles behind by the time it goes into implementation.
But it's a fair point, Greg. And at this point, we need to have open, transparent dialogue about what things look like and what's actually possible. So I mean, we still got quite a few steps to go through. I mean, Jerry and Damon have all laid out the fact that this is going to be a meticulous process and there's methodical pace. So we'll have to see what things look like once we get to the first battle of this next legislative session and really see what happens after that. But I definitely can sympathize with Jerry's position based off conversations I've had at the legislature. So, yeah. Are there any other comments or questions that people have about the building code board meeting? I did put on my email, trying to remember what date it was, but the next building code board meeting is set for August. I do want to make sure that everyone's just aware of that, with the fact that that's going to be when they take up this meeting again and talk about finalizing next steps for looking at the legislative session. I mean, they might dig into it a little bit more after that, but for the bulk of it should be decided by then. I'm just looking to see, it's on August 10th.
It's on the 11th.
Or excuse me, the 11th.
Wait a minute.
It's the 11th at 9:30.
Is the 11th? Okay.
That's what you put, I think,
Okay.
in your email.
I might have been off of my personal calendar, but the week of August 11th, that's when the next building code board meeting will be. So just want to make sure that that's something you're aware of and we can kind of plan towards that. I guess on that note, honestly, just thinking about it, is there any interest in meeting again prior to the August meeting? Is there any interest in holding a meeting in July? Should we wait till the next building code board meeting and then hold our next code collaborative meeting? I'm open to suggestions on that.
The week before, maybe.
Or the week before. We could do that. Yeah, we could do that. The August 6th would be when we would hold that collaborative meeting if we were to do that.
Yeah, that can be a possibility. I wanted to follow up kind of based on some comments that Greg and Jeff had, kind of around, this timeline, right? And if we're looking at if it's the extended timeline that's been presented to us, where January 2029 is essentially when these codes would go into effect. I'd love to gather feedback from this group and from other stakeholders about what risks does that carry for everybody, for buildings, Doppel mentioned that it would be really this whole package and suite of codes that would be a part of this delay, including the fire code. And I know that that's been an area that's been there's been attempted emergency rules to try to help with regulations there. I've heard, insurance issues being mentioned in terms of, buildings becoming ineligible for insurance because of the out of date codes. Greg, your mention of adopting a code in 2029 that by that point is already sort of out of date. There's already a new, 2027 IECC will already be in place. So I think that could be as part of conversations with legislators and other stakeholders, like just really reiterating some of these risks with the delay. It's not just, it's not just the kind of a time, intensive time for the process itself, but risks with the actual codes and having up-to-date structural and energy codes on the books.
I could list out a few risks off the top of my head. I mean, one is so battery storage has become something that is taking greater usage on residential and stuff. Well, the existing codes don't address the fire safety, like when batteries catch fire. So the new codes have addressed on having your battery actually located in the construction for that to make sure you don't burn down your whole house because of the battery. So that's a big significant one that's causing problems with fire departments. With the federal government has phased out some refrigerants, and so now people are going to A2Ls, which are mildly flammable, but that creates a whole problem because existing shafts in commercial buildings where you'd run your piping was never rated for flammable stuff. And so how do you deal with that? And so the new codes have addressed all that type of stuff. And so that's all absent. So that's a huge issue. I mean, normally most of the stuff is on life safety side of the codes. The energy doesn't really affect usually as much for as many problems, with the one caveat being if you have at the basement level, the foundation level, if you don't put in the insulation and things like that on a build, and then if you have a new energy code that takes and you want to do an addition onto that building, whether it's commercial or residential, and if you have to comply with new building codes, well, the elevations of your footings and your foundation may not line up to allow for insulation underneath your slabs and things like that. And then your sewer, I mean, you might have sewer lines that aren't at the right elevation because they weren't dug deep enough to accommodate that. So that's most of the stuff. I mean, there's sometimes issues like if you have insulation in your ceilings, like if you're like energy heal, which we probably, I'd assume Idaho is going to emit anyways, the energy heals, but that can cause some issues sometimes if you're trying to comply. Addition has to comply with the new efficiency and the where the existing building that didn't comply with that. But other than that, usually it's life safety, and there's a lot more, but that's just a list of several things.
Jeff, I know you can't speak for BOMA, but is there any potential concern for those that are in the commercial development side with getting buildings insured because of the delay, or do you think that most of them will be understanding with, hey, your state's just taking a little longer, no worries, we'll move forward business as usual?
It is kind of what it is,
Okay.
unfortunately. And, I think the process is going to take time, unfortunately, with what has transpired. And I don't think we can even necessarily assume that we can educate and get this back on track, but we'll see. I mean, but that is the fundamental issue that a lot of these legislators don't appreciate is, you cannot believe in climate change all you want, but the actuaries believe in it because the data tells them that you're going to have losses. And that's why we've adopted some of these provisions. And again, I think the point like on battery storage is right on. I mean, we're dealing with codes that were developed now nearly 10 years ago that aren't reflective and consistent with what changes are. And it has nothing to do with a regulatory environment. It has everything to do with just how things change. So anybody, in Idaho that's on the commercial side, there's squabbles that we have to go have with lenders and insurers all the time about what we can and can't do. So
And also would like to point out too that, it comes down to certification and testing for the inspectors themselves. Currently, somebody that's wanting to certify on anything in 2018 to, enforce the codes we currently have, they're unable to test under the 2018 editions. They're going to be testing under the 2021. So the further we get behind, which, I mean, it's fine. I mean, you can look at it, well, okay, well, they're going to test on the 2021, they'll be certified, but then you get into consistency issues, then they'll be, they've studied a 2021 code, and are they going to be enforcing stuff that, unknowingly enforcing things that are not enforceable in Idaho. So, that's another issue that we have a lot of concern with.
And especially on this particular code cycle, because they revamped the book. So the book wouldn't even look the same, as what they're used to. So testing on anything newer than the 18 and then going back to the 18, it'd be a struggle just to find things. It doesn't look, the formatting is totally different. So now we have to go back and untrain certain things, retrain certain things. I'm not sure that the jurisdictions are equipped to handle that. But more than anything else, it just presents a lot of undue frustration that doesn't need to be there. We have done quite well with our amending process. We have a code that works. We're not, this process isn't failing. And I don't think they understand that. This is not causing a bunch of chaos out there. It actually works quite well. And we've proven ourselves over time that we know how to do this, with the committee, the collaborative absorbs a lot of that chaos in the process, but the end result seems to work really well. So I don't understand what we're fighting as far as what's already there. And what we're attempting to do is just to continue that process. So if there's not a problem, why are we? I guess that's the question, right? We typically tend to focus on things that are broke. It's not broke.
Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know we've been on for about an hour. That was the bulk of everything that I think we really had for our agenda today. Before I forget though, Jerica, I didn't come to you at the start. Is there anything from a national level or from your role that you felt like was good to bring up during this meeting?
I don't think so, but if anybody ever has any questions about what we're working on or the status of things, you can always reach out to me. I'd be happy to discuss with you. Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Jerica. Was someone else about to ask something? Okay. Well, we should probably just in wrapping up, make a decision about when we would like to next meet. Jerry threw out the suggestion that we could look to meet as a code collaborative that first week of August to prepare for and verify it is the 11th. So thank you, Suzanne and Jerry, for making sure I was correct on that. But if we did that, we would be looking at August 6th. We could also look at July 30th. But if we're trying to be closer towards the building code board meeting and making sure we're trying to provide as much heads up information of what to expect for that meeting, the 6th might work better for that goal. But
it also helps me because I can push Doppel to provide information for the collaborative prior to the board meeting. So I can call and say, hey, we're meeting the Thursday before, I need an update for the collaborative to review. So it does kind of help me a little bit, help us, I should say.
Sounds like it's August 6th.
Works for me. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll plan on August 6th. Would that be the same time at 1 p.m. for everyone? Okay. We will work on getting that invite sent out to everyone. But unless there's anything else, I think that's our meeting for today. Thank you all for hopping on. Looking forward to seeing you in just a little over or a little under 2 months from now in August. But we'll look forward to that meeting. But thanks again, everyone, for being on the call, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.